Hello everyone and welcome to Revenge Vision. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoy the story and have a great time listening. Sit back, relax, and let the story begin. I'm standing behind the counter of Monroe's Diner for the very last time. The bank is coming tomorrow to take the keys. After decades of pouring my life into this place, it's all ending. I'm Dylan Monroe, and this diner is the only thing left of my late wife, Victoria. Our dream, our legacy now slipping away, because the bills finally caught up. The doorbell jingles. 3 strangers walk in, 2 men and a woman dressed too sharp for Pine Bluff, Arkansas, followed by a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. A lawyer. They choose the corner booth and sit down like they own the place. The woman looks straight at me, her eyes steady. "Mr. Monroe," she says quietly. "Do you remember the blizzard night many years ago, the family whose car broke down right outside your door?" My hand freezes on the coffee pot. Coffee. The room tilts. Those words pull up a memory I haven't touched in years. The howling wind, the snow piling against the windows, the desperate knock that changed everything. I let a family sleep in my diner during a blizzard many years ago. Now, on the last day of business, 3 strangers walked in with a lawyer. What they told me shocked this whole small town. Have you ever done something kind for a stranger and wondered if it ever came back around? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how one small act can echo through the years. Hit subscribe if stories like this remind you that good still matters. After Victoria passed, things started getting harder, not all at once, but slowly, the way a small town like Pine Bluff wears down when the world moves on without it. The diner still sits on the main drag, same red vinyl booths lined up against the windows, same long Formica counter with those chrome-legged stools that wobble just enough to remind you how long they've been there. The industrial coffee machine, the one we bought, used back when we first opened, still gurgles to life every morning with that familiar hiss, filling the place with the rich, dark smell that's greeted customers for decades. I keep the walls covered in layers of photos, families celebrating birthdays in the back room, high school teams, after big games, the annual church breakfast fundraiser we hosted year after year. Right above the register hangs the picture of Victoria and me on opening day, both of us grinning like we had forever ahead of us. But the truth is the town has been shrinking for a long while. The cotton fields that used to stretch out forever now sit fallow more often than not, prices too low to cover the costs, and the big poultry plants cut shifts when demand dipped after the pandemic. Folks lost jobs, moved to Little Rock or Memphis, or just tightened their belts and ate at home more. Our lunch crowd, once steady with farmers and factory workers, thinned out to a handful of regulars who nurse black coffee for hours. The evening takeout orders we relied on during the shutdowns never really came back strong, and the overhead never stopped rent utilities, insurance, the endless little repairs on equipment that's older than some of the kids who used to sit at the counter doing homework. Victoria used to say this place was more than a business. It was our home, the heart of the town where people came not just for eggs and biscuits, but for the feeling that somebody knew their name. She ran the front with that easy smile, remembering orders before folks even sat down, while I stayed back in the kitchen flipping pancakes the way she liked them, thick, golden, with a pat of butter melting right in the center. When the doctors told us about her heart, everything changed fast. Diagnosis to goodbye in months. She spent her last days upstairs in the apartment above the diner, looking out the window at the same street she'd watched for so many years. 3 days before she left, she took my hand and made me promise I'd keep the doors open no matter what. "This is what we built together, Dylan," she whispered. "Don't let it go." I tried. God knows I tried. I cut costs where I could, worked every shift myself, took on catering for the few events left in town. But the numbers don't lie. The pandemic took 70% of our revenue while the bills stayed the same, and the loans I took out to bridge the gap only dug the hole deeper. No kids to help carry the load, no family stepping in, just me, the counter, and the quiet that grows louder every month. Some mornings I still catch myself setting 2 plates out of habit, then remembering she's not coming down the stairs anymore. The promise I made her feels heavier than ever, but the bank's notice is clear: tomorrow they take the keys, unless a miracle happens. The photos on the wall remind me of better days, but they also remind me how much has slipped away. Still, every time I flip the lights on, the smell of coffee starts up again, and for a minute it feels like Victoria is right there behind me, tying on her apron ready for another shift. That's the part I can't let go of yet. That morning the regulars started arriving early. Deputy Sheriff Hank Thompson pushed through the door first, just as he had every shift change for years, his badge still shining under the fluorescent lights. He took his usual stool at the end of the counter and waited for his black coffee without saying much. But when I set the mug down, he looked up and said, "Dylan, I couldn't stay away today. The department's already talking about where we'll go for breakfast now." I poured the refill he always took and listened while he recounted the night his youngest daughter had her first heartbreak, right here, sitting in the booth by the window. Victoria had brought her pie on the house and sat with her until she stopped crying. Hank left a 20 on the counter, more than enough for the meal, and squeezed my shoulder before heading out. Pastor Ellen Hayes arrived next with her husband, carrying a small jar of peach preserves from their garden as a parting gift. They settled into the window booth they had claimed every Sunday after service for as long as anyone could remember. Ellen ordered her usual short stack with extra butter and maple syrup, then looked around the room and said, "This diner has been our gathering place through everything: weddings, funerals, storms. Remember the night we all came here after the tornado warning? You kept the lights on and the coffee hot until dawn." Her husband added how Victoria used to slip extra bacon to the kids in the youth group when their parents weren't looking. They ate slowly, talking quietly about the community dinners we hosted, and when they stood to leave, Ellen hugged me and whispered, "You gave this town more than food, Dylan. You gave it a home." The Henderson family came in around 9 generations, filling the corner booth they had occupied since the grandkids were in high chairs. Old Mr. Henderson, who used to bring his tractor parts in for me to look at while he ate breakfast, shook my hand firmly and said, "We drove in from the farm just for this. One last order of hash browns, crispy on the outside, soft inside the way you always make them." His daughter shared the story of her wedding rehearsal dinner here, how Victoria had strung up lights in the back room and made sure every plate was perfect. The grandkids, now teenagers, ordered chocolate chip pancakes and took turns hugging me, their eyes bright but trying to hold back tears. They lingered, swapping memories of summer mornings, counting change for ice cream at the counter. A group of high school seniors piled in during the lunch hour skipping class for one final run. They crammed into the big booth phones, out snapping pictures of the jukebox that hadn't played in years and the chalkboard menu with faded specials. The quarterback, who used to come after Friday night games, said Coach always told us this was the best place to celebrate a win. "You fed us when we were broke and starving after practice." They ordered burgers, fries, and milkshakes, sharing stories about the time Victoria let them stay late during a heavy rain playing cards until the storm passed. By early afternoon, the diner felt fuller than it had in months, not with strangers but with the people who had made this place part of their routine. An old farmer who stopped in every harvest season arrived with his wife, ordered the same fried chicken plate he had eaten for decades, and simply said, "Thank you for being here when we needed a place to sit and talk." I stood at the grill flipping burgers one last time, the sizzle filling the air as the room filled with quiet laughter and soft stories, the kind of warmth that only comes when a community gathers to say goodbye to something they all loved. When the bell above the door jingled, I thought it was just a late customer. The 3 of them walked in first, a woman in her late 20s with auburn hair pulled back neatly, followed by 2 men who looked like brothers, one with a serious expression and the other more relaxed, but still dressed in clothes that stood out against the worn red booths of Pine Bluff. The lawyer came last, older, carrying a slim briefcase, and wearing a suit that said he didn't spend much time in small-town Arkansas. They chose the large corner booth, the one we used for parties, back when the diner was busy every night, and sat down without rushing. I grabbed 4 menus and 4 water glasses, walked over, and asked what they would like. "Just coffee for all of us, please." The woman said, her voice calm, but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't place. I nodded, poured the cups from the fresh pot, and set them down. They looked at me, not in the usual way people do when they're passing through, but like they were studying a photograph that had come to life. The older man, the lawyer, cleared his throat and spoke first. "Mr. Monroe. I'm Paul Monroe, attorney for the Pierce Family Trust. These are Ava Pierce, Liam Pierce, and Ethan Pierce." The names hit me like a cold wind. Pierce. The family from that blizzard night many years ago, the one that had almost slipped into the back of my mind until the door opened today. I stood there with the coffee pot still in my hand, trying to process it. The woman Ava leaned forward slightly and continued. "We were the children in that station wagon that broke down outside your diner. You and your wife let us stay the night, fed us, gave us dry clothes, fixed the car, and even helped with money for repairs. We never forgot." My legs felt unsteady. I pulled a chair from the nearest table and sat down across from them because standing suddenly seemed impossible. The memories flooded back in sharp pieces, the wind howling outside, snow piling against the windows, the small faces looking up at Victoria as she handed out blankets. The father, Ronald Pierce, had shaken my hand so hard it hurt, promising he would pay us back one day. The mother, Barbara, had cried quiet tears of relief, while the kids ate grilled cheese sandwiches like they were the best meal they'd ever had. Ethan, the youngest of the 3, spoke next, his voice low but steady. My dad wrote about that night in his journal. He said, "You saved us not just from the storm, but from thinking the world was only cold and indifferent." He tried to send money several times, but it always came back. After he and Mom passed in the car accident, we found the journal and the old checks. We made a promise at their funeral to find you and make it right. Liam nodded and added, "We've been looking for a long time. It took years, wrong addresses closed, post offices, people who moved away. But we kept going because Dad always said kindness like yours doesn't disappear. It waits." I looked at each of them, Ava's steady eyes, Liam's quiet determination, Ethan's earnest expression, and saw the echoes of the little kids huddled under blankets in my booth. They weren't strangers anymore. They were the family I had helped without thinking twice, now sitting here on the day I thought everything was ending. The diner felt smaller, the air thicker, as if the past had walked in and taken a seat. Paul Monroe opened his briefcase and placed a folder on the table, but he didn't push it toward me yet. Instead, he said, "We didn't come to talk about the past right away. We came because we know what this place means to you, and we know today is the day the bank takes it. But before we go any further, we need you to understand why we're here." I nodded slowly, still trying to catch my breath. The coffee in front of them had gone untouched. Outside, the winter light was fading, but inside the diner, everything felt suspended, waiting for whatever came next. That was the night a rare blizzard swept in unexpectedly across the Delta many years ago. The storm started around late afternoon, the kind that catches everyone off guard in this part of Arkansas, where snow usually amounts to nothing more than a light dusting. By evening, the wind picked up howling through the gaps in the windows and driving thick flakes sideways across Highway 65, turning the road into a sheet of ice in minutes. Visibility dropped to almost zero, and the temperature plunged fast enough to make the engine of any car hesitate. We had already closed the diner early, because no one was coming out in that weather, but Victoria and I were still inside, wiping down the counter and putting away the last of the food, when we heard the sputter of an engine dying in the parking lot. We looked at each other across the empty room. Victoria went to the window, first pressing her face close to the glass. "There's a station wagon out there," she said, voice low. "Family inside, 3 little ones in the back." I grabbed my coat and unlocked the door without thinking twice. The wind hit me like a wall when I stepped out, snow stinging my face as I shouted over the noise for them to come inside. The father carried the youngest child, a boy, who couldn't have been more than 4, while the mother held the hand of the middle one, a girl who looked about 6. The oldest, a boy around 8, walked between them with his head down against the gusts. They stumbled through the door, snow clinging to their coats and boots, faces red from the cold. The kids were crying quietly, the parents looking exhausted and scared. Victoria locked the door behind them and immediately went into action, grabbing towels from behind the counter. "Get those wet things off," she said gently to the mother. "We have dry clothes upstairs, sweatpants, shirts, socks. They'll be big, but they'll keep you warm." I ran up the stairs to the apartment and brought down armfuls of our spare clothes, while Victoria ushered the children toward the big corner booth, the one with high backs that blocked drafts. The father introduced himself as Ronald Pierce, his wife Barbara, and their children Ava, Liam, and Ethan. They were from Kansas City, driving to see grandparents in Memphis for the holidays, thinking they could push through the weather. The car had started making terrible noises, smoke from the engine, and then it just quit. Ronald looked at me with blue lips and said, "We don't know what to do. There's no hotel close enough, and we can't stay in the car." Barbara added quietly that they had spent most of their cash on gifts and gas, counting on staying with family, not paying for repairs or a room. Victoria didn't hesitate. "You're staying here," she told them firmly. "It's a blizzard, you have children, and you're safe now." She turned to me and said, "Dylan, get the space heaters from the storage room. I'll start soup." We set up 3 old heaters around the booth, piled on every blanket we had, emergency ones, picnic blankets, even tablecloths from the closet. The kids were shivering, hard teeth chattering, so Victoria took Barbara and the children to the bathroom to change, while I handed Ronald dry clothes for himself. He changed in the kitchen, thanking me over and over. By the time everyone was in dry clothes, I had vegetable soup simmering and grilled cheese sandwiches ready on the grill, comfort food that kids love when they're cold and scared. They ate like they hadn't seen food in days, the small faces lighting up as warmth returned to their cheeks. Ronald explained they were accountants, not mechanics, and the transmission was shot from the cold. They had no money for a tow or repairs until the next paycheck. Barbara looked down at her bowl and said softly, "We were trying to save for Christmas. We thought we could make it." Victoria reached across the table and took Barbara's hand. "Don't worry about that tonight. You're warm, the kids are safe, that's what matters." I went out into the storm to look at the car, snow up to my knees, and confirmed the transmission was gone. In the morning, I called Joe's garage in town. He towed it in and fixed it for a fraction of the usual price because I asked. When Ronald tried to refuse the help, I handed him a couple $100 from my wallet and said, "Take it. Get to your family. Have a good holiday. That's all we want." They stayed until the storm eased around dawn. The kids fell asleep in the booth under piles of blankets curled up together like puppies. Ronald and Barbara dozed, sitting up, heads together. Victoria and I sat at the counter drinking coffee, watching them sleep, while the wind rattled the windows. She looked at me and said, "We're not charging them for anything." I agreed without a word. When they left the next day, Ronald tried to give back the money, but I refused. Barbara hugged Victoria and whispered, "We'll never forget this." The children waved from the back window as the car pulled away, and that was the last we saw of them until today. After I recognized them, I asked how they found me. Ava leaned forward slightly, folding her hands on the table. "Dad kept trying to pay you back for years. He wrote letters, sent checks with interest, but they always came back wrong: address, post office closed, or the diner had a different name in the records. He never stopped talking about that night. He said it taught him that people could still be good without expecting anything in return." Liam picked up the story, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "After the car accident took both Mom and Dad, we went through their things together. That's when we found the journal. He wrote pages about you and Victoria, how you opened the door in the storm, how you fed us when we had nothing, how you gave them money from your own pocket without hesitation. He called it the moment he decided to raise us differently. At the funeral, we made a promise right there in the church parking lot we would find you, thank you properly, and repay the kindness in a way that honored what you did." Ethan nodded, glancing at his siblings before continuing. "We were young then, still in school barely making ends meet. But we kept the promise alive. Ava went to medical school and became a pediatrician. She works in a clinic now treating kids who can't afford care because she remembers how you treated us like your own. Liam studied engineering and builds affordable housing projects. He says he learned early that a safe place to sleep matters more than anything. I finished law school and work in corporate law, but I take pro bono cases for small businesses struggling like this diner was." Ava smiled faintly. "We started searching in earnest once we had stable jobs. Old records from the post office, property deeds, online directories. Nothing worked at first. Then Liam found an article about small-town diners in Arkansas, and your name came up in a community post. We knew it was you. We contacted Paul here, our family attorney, and asked him to look into the diner's status. When he told us the bank was foreclosing, we decided this was the time." Paul Monroe opened the folder in front of him, but didn't slide it over yet. "The trust your parents left behind was modest, but the three of them added to it over the years. They wanted to do something meaningful when the moment came. Finding out about the diner's situation made the decision clear. I sat there listening, the weight of their words settling in. Ronald and Barbara had carried that night with them all those years, turning it into something that shaped their children. Ava, Liam, and Ethan weren't just grateful, they had built lives around the lesson they learned in my diner. The coffee had gone cold in front of us, but the booth felt warmer than it had in a long time. Ava reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Dad kept one of the returned checks, the first one from back then. He wrote a note on it, "For when the time is right." We think that time is now. I looked at the three of them, seeing the little faces from that stormy night in their adult expressions. The diner was quiet, except for the hum of the old refrigerator in the back. Whatever came next, I knew one thing: this wasn't just about money or a building. It was about a promise kept across decades. Paul Monroe pushed the folder across the table. He opened it carefully and slid the top document toward me. This is the payoff statement from the bank. $180,000, exactly the full remaining balance on the mortgage, including interest and fees. We wired the funds this morning. The lien is released, and the title is clear. I stared at the paper, the numbers swimming in front of me. The diner, the place Victoria and I had poured every spare dollar and every late night into, was no longer underwater. Paul continued without pause, his voice even and professional. "The deed has been transferred back to you, Dylan. No strings, no conditions. It's yours free and clear. The bank has already filed the satisfaction of mortgage with the county clerk." Ava reached over and touched the next page in the folder. We didn't stop there. We set up an operational fund, $50,000 deposited into a separate account in your name. It's for repairs, equipment, upgrades, utilities, whatever you need to keep the place running. If you decide to hire help or take a day off, it's there. No repayment required. Liam spoke up, his tone quieter than before. "We talked about this for a long time. Dad always said the money he owed you wasn't just dollars. It was the value of knowing someone cared enough to help strangers in the middle of nowhere. We wanted to give you back more than the amount. We wanted to give you the chance to keep going." Ethan added, "The trust documents are all here. You sign once and everything becomes official. No taxes for you on the gift portion. We structured it through the family trust to comply with IRS rules. It's clean, legal, and final." I felt the tears come before I could stop them. They started slow, then spilled over as I looked from the papers to their faces. These three people, who had been small children shivering in my booth all those years ago, had grown into adults who remembered. They hadn't come with empty words or old promises. They had come with action, the kind that changes everything. My hands shook as I reached for the pen Paul offered. I signed where the tabs indicated first the acceptance of the deed transfer, then the acknowledgement of the fund deposit. Each signature felt heavier than the last, not from burden, but from the weight of gratitude that pressed on my chest. When I finished, Paul gathered the documents, stamped them with his notary seal, and placed them back in the briefcase. "It's done," he said simply. Ava smiled through her own tears. "You helped us when we had nothing. Now we help you. That's how it works." Liam stood up first and extended his hand. "We're not going anywhere. We'll be back to check on the place to make sure it stays open. This isn't goodbye, it's a new beginning." Ethan hugged me, then a quick but firm embrace. "Thank you for teaching us what kindness looks like. We never forgot." I wiped my eyes with the back of my sleeve and managed a nod. The diner, which had felt so empty just hours before, suddenly seemed full again, not with customers yet, but with possibility. The papers in Paul's briefcase represented more than numbers. They represented a circle completed a debt repaid not in money alone, but in the continuation of something Victoria and I had started together. As they gathered their coats, Ava turned back one last time. "We'll see you soon, Dylan. Keep the coffee on." They left through the same door they had entered, the bell jingling softly behind them. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty booth, the folder gone, but the feeling remaining. The diner was mine again. Not just the building, but the life inside it. For the first time in a long while, the weight on my shoulders lifted. By late afternoon, the whole town of Pine Bluff seemed to wake up. Word spread fast in a place like this. Someone saw the lawyer's car outside, someone else noticed the 3 young people hugging me through the window, and by the time the sun dipped low, people started showing up again. First it was the Hendersons back with their grandkids, and a tray of homemade pies. Then Hank Thompson rolled in with half the sheriff's department, all ordering the full breakfast menu, even though it was past dinner time. Pastor Ellen Hayes arrived with the church choir, who sang a quiet hymn in the back room, while folks ate. The high school seniors who had been there earlier came back with their parents, and soon the diner was packed wall to wall, every booth full, the counter lined with people standing shoulder to shoulder. Joe from the garage showed up with his toolbox and started looking at the old grill without being asked. "Heard what happened," he said. "Anything that needs fixing, I'll do it free of charge. This place is worth saving. Maria Lopez, who had waited tables here 20 years ago, walked in and said she was between jobs. If you need staff, I'm coming back. The kids miss your pancakes." By nightfall, I had a list of volunteers, farmers offering to repaint the exterior, the hardware store promising supplies at cost, even the local newspaper wanting to run a feature on the diner's second chance. The next few weeks felt like a dream. Customers drove in from Little Rock and beyond, drawn by the story that spread online and through word of mouth. The place got busier than it had been in decades. Lunch rushes with lines out the door, evening crowds, ordering the old specials Victoria used to write on the chalkboard. I hired back the old staff, and a couple of new faces gave them raises I could finally afford, and watched the diner come alive again. Every morning, I unlocked the door, started the coffee, and looked up at the opening day photo of Victoria and me. "We made it," I told her quietly. "The diner's going to be okay. We're going to be okay." Ava, Liam, and Ethan became part of our routine. They visited every few months sometimes together, sometimes one at a time, always bringing stories from their lives and asking how things were going. We sat in the same corner booth, drinking coffee, and talking about the night that had connected us all. They never asked for anything in return. They just wanted to see the place thriving the way their parents had hoped it would. Looking back now, I realize kindness doesn't vanish. It waits sometimes for decades, until the right moment arrives to come full circle. What happened here in Pine Bluff proves that one small act on a stormy night can ripple outward, touching lives long after the snow melts. If you're ever faced with a stranger in need on a cold night, think about what you would do. Would you open the door? Would you let them stay? Because the truth is, you never know whose life you might change, or whose kindness might one day find its way back to you. Thank you for listening, all the way to the end of this story. It means more than you know that you stayed with me through every word. If it touched you, if it reminded you that good still exists in the world, please share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my place? And if you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The world needs more reminders that kindness matters, and I'm grateful to have you along for the journey.